I would like to open this morning's sitting. First of all, Chairman's announcement. Stefania Zambelli, member of the EPP Group, is a member as of date of the 19th of October 2023. Moving on now to this morning's agenda. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, President. Just in accordance with Rule 154 and the President's right to convene Parliament, I move that it is incumbent on the President to call upon the Secretary-General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, to address this House in relation to the recent bombing of Gaza and his call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in the Middle East. Thank you, President.
Grazie a lei, onorevole. Naturalmente.
Thank you, Madam. I will, of course, refer your request to the President of the Parliament, so as to ensure she's aware of that. Coming back to today's agenda, the first item is a debate this morning on the European Citizens' Initiative for Free Europe. The first speaker in the debate is the author, Mr. Wietzig.
I apologize, Madam President, I'm not used to speak that soon in the debate, but thank you very much for the floor. I will continue in Slovak. Dámy a páni, to, čo budeme dneska konzultovať.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Honourable members, this is the fourth successful European Citizens' Initiative. Of 10 successful initiatives, this is the fourth dealing with animal welfare. It has been overwhelmingly successful. Signature collection was closed 2.5 months early, and over 1.5 million signatures were collected. As far as the Petitions Committee is concerned, we have to say that this ECI tool is key to direct democracy in a cross-border area. It is an instrument that gives citizens a strong voice. We need a proper response from the Commission. In that way, the ECI would be an essential tool of participatory democracy. So what are the main calls in this ECI? Firstly, end the breeding and killing of animals for the sole purpose of fur production, and end the placing on the EU market of fur from farm animals and any products containing such fur. The reasons are quite pragmatic. Fur farming is in stark contradiction to the animal's nature. It is cruel. There is a risk, many risks. There is a real risk that many diseases may be spread, COVID-19, bird flu. And there are huge risks to biodiversity. I am pleased by the following. At the EU Council in June, Member States also responded to this European Citizens' Initiative by calling on the Commission to ban fur farming across the entire EU. 14 Member States have already banned fur farming. So far, only one country in the world has banned the sale of fur, Israel. I believe that this initiative is extremely important. We call for a legislative proposal from the Commission. We hope that we will soon see tangible steps taken by the Commission. I want to believe what Mrs. von der Leyen said is that if it matters to Europe, it matters to us. That should not be empty words.
Thank you. The next speaker on behalf of the Commission, Commissioner.
Grazie, Presidente. Honourable Chair, honourable members. For Free Europe, as was just mentioned, is the 10th successful European Citizens' Initiative since 2012, when this mechanism was introduced, and the fourth this year to which the Commission will respond. It is also the 6th initiative concerning animals, which shows the importance that EU citizens attribute to animal welfare. Over 1.5 million citizens supported this initiative, and this level of support was collected within 10 months. This shows not only the dynamism of the European Citizens' Initiative as a tool, but also the commitment of so many engaged citizens across our Union to campaign for their ideas and make an impact in the causes they believe. Last week, the European Parliament organised a public hearing where the initiative organisers presented their objectives and engaged in a fruitful debate with members of this House. Through this initiative, citizens request the EU to prohibit the keeping and killing of animals for fur production, and to prohibit the placing of farmed animal fur on the EU market. The Commission gives high importance to ideas submitted via European citizens' initiatives, and I assure you that we will examine these requests with the greatest attention. To date, at least 16 member states have already banned fur farming, either across the board or for certain species. Animal welfare is and will remain a priority for the Commission. A recent example of that is the adoption in early 2023 of new rules governing the transport of animals by sea. We also promote animal welfare via the EU Platform for Animal Welfare, or the EU Reference Centres for Animal Welfare, whose remit has been broadened. We carry out regular audits and controls to enforce existing EU animal welfare legislation. Moreover, the Commission will present by the end of this year a proposal to revise the EU rules on the protection of animals during transport. The Commission takes all European citizens' initiatives very seriously. For us to prepare our response, it will be important to carefully assess all aspects of the initiative's requests based on solid scientific evidence and an assessment of the economic, social, environmental and legal aspects. We're also looking at fur farming from a One Health perspective and closely monitor the SARS-CoV-2 and high-path avian influenza risks in those farms. The work of the European Food Safety Authority and the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control is crucial in this regard. The views and support of this House are important. Hence, I welcome today's debate, which provides an important opportunity to gather more insights on this initiative. I'm looking forward to hearing your views. Thank you.
Grazie. E ora facoltà di...
Thank you. The next speaker, Mr. Yao.
Ja, Frau Präsidentin, Frau
Madam President, Commissioner, colleagues. As an active member of the Petitions Committee, I am of course absolutely delighted whenever we have a successful request for a European Citizens' Initiative, as we can see with 1.5 million signatures. This initiative certainly deserves to be taken seriously. It was handed in recently. On the 12th of October, we had a public hearing under the auspice of the Petitions Committee together with the Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee. So we've already seen how important this issue is. So in my speech today, I would like to point out that my position is, of course, my own personal one, or coloured at least by that. Clearly, this debate strays into the area of general values within society, the question as to whether we can rear animals purely for reasons of producing fur. And those who are against that, I can support your position. So obviously, seen globally, these things are often quite straightforward. Once we start looking at details, things become more complicated. So we might have similar ideas with cattle rearing, for example. Nobody would suggest that we use the skin of the cattle to produce leather, but we throw away the rest of the animal. So when it comes to fur production, that's the kind of issue we're talking about. So one of the questions we do have to ask ourselves is, what can we do with what remains of the body? Can we produce food for humans, biogas? I'm not sure. But clearly, within the political discussion, we have to address those aspects. The whole idea of rearing animals purely to produce fur is something we should reject. Having said that, I look forward very much to continuing this debate within the House, and I hope that we can come to a conclusion, not have to keep coming back to this. Thank you very much. The next speaker, Mr. Seidel.
Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin, meine sehr
President, ladies and gentlemen, this is an initiative supported by 1.5 million people to phase out this awful practice. So we're talking about mink and fox, for example. The conditions are really unacceptable. The cages are tiny. The animals can barely move. They cannot carry out their natural behaviors. There is infected wounds, cannibalism, all sorts of horrible aspects. And this is just to create luxury items. And in 2023, this isn't necessary at all. This is something that should be banned, and Europe should be taking the first steps to do this. Thank you.
Facoltà ora di intervenire l'onorevole.
Thank you. The next speaker, Mr. Yabs.
Dargā prezidents kundze,
Madam Chair, Commissioner, just keeping and killing animals for furs is unethical. It is an issue of humanism. And people simply don't admit such killing anymore. But this is an issue of fair competition. And actually, we can see that during COVID, we experienced a lot of risks posed to people's health as well. From 18, the worst invasive species in Europe are coming from fur farming. And there are huge differences in legislation in different EU countries. My country, Latvia, has banned farmed animal fur farming, and I am supporting such a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, Mr. Guerreiro.
Cara Presidente.
Thank you, President. I am grateful to the petitioners for gathering 1.5 million signatures. Civil society and NGOs achieved this. We're always taken aback by the response. The Commission talks a good game about animal welfare, but when it comes to taking action, all we hear is debate and words. We have rules on animal transport, but animals, livestock are not being properly protected. Ethically, this is not right, and there is no economic justification. We need to achieve this goal. There is no need for this fur, and the corpses are just thrown away. Thank you.
Presidente.
Madam President, Commissioner. I attended the public hearing a few days ago in the European Parliament in Brussels. I must say, it was a quite small debate with just 11 members. And the fur industry didn't have an opportunity to take part in this debate because they weren't invited. They didn't have a chance either to respond to attacks or defend their position. And this is the way we want to legislate in this House. I hope that we'll be able to have a debate on the fur sector based on scientific evidence and drawing from what actually happens in these farms. We have to be able to counter statements and affirmations which aren't based on science, but which are based on an ecological, ideological approach. We have to ensure that we can establish fair rules, and we have to do this on a scientific basis. We have to listen to experts on animal behavior. Those of you who have read the Independent Programme of Animal Welfare, which is drawn up by seven European universities, has surveyed all the farms around Europe. More than 15,000 have been visited. This data was then analysed by independent scientists, and we should use this to draw up independent legislation on all domestic animals, including fur animals. Why should we do this? It's important to ensure that in future, when we produce fur in Europe, it should be in line with the strict regulation of all is in favour of. If we don't do that, the fur industry will disappear and other countries will replace European producers, but in far worse conditions. Thank you, Ms. Brunner.
Après une vie de misère dans des cages exiguës, les animaux
facing a miserable life in cages. Animals are gassed, they're electrocuted, sometimes they're still conscious. It's an abomination, and it's also a risk for zoonotic diseases as well. These animals, bred for their fur, contract viral diseases quite easily, which can then mutate. In August last year, 120,000 mink and fox had to be killed in Finland to stop bird flu spreading, which had been passed on by wild birds. H5N1 is at risk of mutation, of combining with another virus. So I would ask the European Commission to end the breeding and selling of fur on European markets. It will end animal suffering in this way and progressively phase out keeping animals in cages and possibly avoid a new pandemic as well.
Thank you, Ms. Hazekamp.
Dank u wel, voorzitter.
Thank you, President. If it matters to Europeans, it matters to Europe. Those were the words uttered by Commission President von der Leyen last month. But what are those words worth if the European Commission does not honour its own pledge to come forward with new and ambitious animal welfare legislation? What are those words worth if this House does not even go to the effort of adopting a position on the fur industry, despite the fact that 1.5 million people called for this industry to be banned in Europe? What are these words worth? President, the fur industry quite literally picks over corpses. Predators preying on mink, fox and raccoon dogs who wish to play, hunt and swim. But the cruel reality is that they are robbed of that freedom, locked in small cages throughout their lives, pining away. Thousands stuffed in together. They cannot run free. They harm themselves, barely eat, miscarry their own babies on account of stress. Foxes are even fattened up to produce more fur. Animals farmed for fur are victims of a diseased system and end their lives in the most cruelest way, electrocuted, stripped of their pelt. I don't understand the fur industry. We hear that if we ban the fur industry in Europe, animals will suffer a worse fate elsewhere in the world. Well, I don't understand that. I think we need to ban the import of fur. That is the response. And how long are we in Europe going to remain silent while the fur industry notches up more deaths? Animals don't deserve this. Citizens don't want this. And an increasing part of the fashion industry want to put an end to this. Do we wait until the last country in Europe bans the fur industry, or will the Commission finally take the lead and ban the fur industry in Europe? You could use the final year of your mandate to show that you take citizens seriously. Come forward with an initiative banning the fur industry, production and import of fur in Europe. Let us work together to ensure a fur-free Europe.
Thank you. Ms. Ferrara. Thank you, Madam President. The time has come for us to bring an end to this suffering inflicted on these animals in cages, whether they're wild or domestic animals, when they're farmed simply for the purpose of making money from their fur. More than 1.5 million European citizens have supported this appeal by signing this European Citizens' Initiative for Fur-Free Europe. This type of rearing of animals is in fundamental contradiction with the basic rules of animal welfare. It's not ethical, it's not safe, nor is it sustainable. It can be highly dangerous for public health and, of course, for our local biodiversity. The fur industry has been classified as one of the 5 biggest polluters in Europe. Some 20 states have already adopted the urgency of acting and have introduced legislation to limit production of fur. So many citizens of Europe are asking for this, so I would call on the European Commission to come forward as quickly as possible with a legislative proposal so as to bring to an end this market which produces nothing more than useless cruelty for animals. Let's bring an end to the fur market in Europe. Adamovich.
Presidente.
Ms. Adamovich is not with us. In that case, the next speaker is Ms. Cavalais.
Caros colegas, a pandemia do Covid-19, por exemplo, trouxe...
Dear colleagues, the COVID-19 pandemic brought us a lot of suffering, but it has shone a light on a sector that European citizens are looking at now, and we cannot allow this to continue anymore. This citizens' initiative lists different factors, reasons that we cannot ignore. So breeding animals for their fur is unacceptable. It goes against animal welfare. It is a risk to public health. It is a risk to the environment. The basic issue I want to talk about is what is the added value? How does this contribute to the well-being of society? Breeding animals just for their fur is something which is obsolete. It belongs in the past. It simply cannot be allowed to occur in a society that says it respects animals as one of its fundamental values. We have to end this madness. Animals are being treated as objects and it's vanity.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Dear Commissioner, dear Chair, I stand with the citizens. Keeping and killing animals for the purpose of fur production and sale is cruel and unnecessary. Each year, around 37 million animals are killed for this business. Not only can animal welfare standards not be respected on fur farms, but fur farm is also posing a public health threat. Fur farms act as reservoirs for diseases, as we have seen during the COVID pandemic. Because of pollution and invasive species, fur farming also directly contributes to the decay of the EU's biodiversity and ecosystem. This is why we need to keep fighting for a coordinated phase-out of production of sales and fur. For fur-free Europe to become an official EU policy for the citizens, for the animals, for the environment. It is a shame also that the majority of the members of this parliament have voted against a resolution for Free Europe ECI, even though more than 1 million of EU citizens have called for a ban on fur. Let's ban fur farming. Thank you.
Grazie. Onorevole Jurgel.
Thank you. Mr. Jurgel.
The debate on fur-free Europe should be free from ideology, and the decision on the potential ban cannot be taken under any pressure or emotions. The EU, it's over 450 million European citizens. Definitely, fur farms should stick to standards, European and international, when it comes to animal well-being. And no animals should be kept in cages, and we should not inflict any suffering in this process on animal. That's why definitely we should boost awareness of fur farm owners about this. I am definitely for regulations for such farms at the European level. Horizontal regulations for such farms should be based on respective national regulations, take account of regional regulations and the influence on the local labour market. Going away from fur farms gradually should be done with appropriate compensation, financial compensation. We should make sure that owners of such farms would have the possibility to retrain and go into a different business.
Thank you, Ms. Danzi. Thank you, President. The Commission recently announced that it doesn't intend to propose legislation regarding animal welfare before the end of this period. This is a betrayal of the principles of the treaty. It's also a betrayal and a slap in the face for 1.5 million people who signed an initiative calling for an end to fur production in Europe. The raising of animals for fur production is cruel. It's completely unethical, and it represents a threat for biodiversity and the environment. The fur industry is listed amongst the 5 most polluting industries emitting toxic metals into our environment. Many member states have already adopted a total ban. Hundreds of fashion houses have refused to continue working with fur in response to the ethic demands of their customers. What would it take for Europe to support this? Clearly, we do need to harmonise the internal market. Let's put forward this change to legislation and ensure that our principles live up to the aspirations of our citizens.
Vážená paní předsedající, dámy a pánové.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful to be able to speak in this debate because I think it's very important. Today we are discussing a possible ban on fur farms in the European Union. The facts are that more than half of EU member states already have this ban. My country, the Czech Republic, adopted this ban in 2017 and it's in force since 2019. I had the honor to be in that discussion and promote this ban, and it has clearly shown that the public, the people, want this ban. They want animals not to suffer. Madam Commissioner, we, however, need a total pan-European ban, and in order for it to make sense, it's necessary to ban fur farms in the entire Union. The arguments have been said, and they are clear. To have animals only for fur is unethical and immoral. Animals are killed only so that someone can wear something fancy. It's a thing that is indefensible in the 21st century. There is not a single ethical argument for animals to be tortured this way. Then there is another argument from an expert point of view. The animals suffer in their cages. Experts agree on this. It's not true that the animals don't care, they don't mind. The public wants fur production to be banned. The numbers are clear. 1.5 million of people want this ban, and 89% of Europeans, according to the Eurobarometer, wants the Union to improve animal welfare. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you. Mr. Engler.
Grazie, signora Presidente.
Thank you, Madam President. citizens to directly participate in European democracy, and yet the Commission simply ignores. This is the 10th successful citizens' initiative, and, Madam Commissioner, is the 4th one in which so many citizens, 1.5 million, are asking us to legislate on animal welfare. This time, citizens are telling us that as consumers, they do not want 37 million animals per year to be simply born and raised in cages, to be killed in order to get their fare. They are electrocuted to be stripped of their fare. This is unethical, unsafe, unsustainable, and simply despicable. It disrespects the wild animals' behavioral needs. It risks both animal and human health and also harms our biodiversity. We want a fare-free Europe now. We need to ban this unethical behaviour by humans on animals as soon as possible in Europe. And citizens are asking us to do this in this mandate, Madam Commissioner, not later on. Thank you.
Onorevole Roos, prego.
Ms. Roos.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, President. As my colleagues have said, breeding animals for fur is unacceptable. Having animals in cages, particularly wild animals, which goes completely against their behaviour, gassing them, electrocuting them, just to create luxury items, that should not be the case anymore. It is time to act at European level to ban breeding animals for fur and to ban the sale of products containing fur. This is the 4th time since the start of the mandate that we are here once again to talk about a citizens' initiative that talks about animal welfare. So I would like to ask a question. What has come of the previous European Citizens' Initiative on the end of cages, for example? The Commissioner had committed to phasing this out by 2027. There was meant to be a legislative proposal before the summer, but it seems to have been abandoned. How can you expect European citizens to trust in the EU if the Commission makes promises and then its President simply abandons that just a few months from the elections? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vince.
Grazie, Presidente. Dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, congratulations to the organisers of the For Free Europe Successful European Citizens Initiative. As standing rapporteur for the ECIs in the Parliament, I am glad that another initiative made it to the plenary, the 10th in 10 years. More than 1.5 million Europeans signed your proposal. It is a remarkable number, which means not only a huge responsibility towards the supporters, but it gives a strong signal to the EU institutions that the ECIs cannot be ignored by the legislators. The EU animal welfare legislation is currently under revision. The EPP Group welcomes it. The Commission's initiative is an opportunity to introduce the necessary provisions concerning a full ban on fur farms. Our Parliament is an important supporter of citizens' participation. Through the plenary debates, we help raising awareness of the many ideas that emerge from the public agenda through various ECIs. In this regard, we will certainly carefully assess the actions taken by the Commission on the fur-free EU. Thank you very much.
Grazie, onorevole Neukel.
Thank you, Ms. Neuchel.
Liebe Kolleginnen,
honourable members, Commissioner, it is clear that the people have spoken. The Citizens' Initiative adopted a clear stance backing our position on banning fur farming. Trading in fur. For one coat alone, 60 mink have to be slaughtered. What about chinchilla coats? 200 animals have to be slaughtered for that single coat. That is perverse. It is despicable that so many animals have to be killed for fashion. Breeding animals for fur production alone is perverse. We need to be clear what our position is. We don't want fur production and we don't want countries around the world to be able to import their fur into Europe. We need a clear ban on imports as well. Fur production has no place in Europe. Thank you.
Ms. Reaper.
Tiere empfinden Schmerz.
Animals can feel pain, fear, happiness, just like animals. They are described as sentient beings under the EU treaties. Despite this, animals every single day have to suffer millions of times over. They have short, painful lives in these cages when they are bred for fur. And what is the need for this? We don't need fur. There's enough other alternatives. And breeding animals in this way can lead to different zoonoses as well. And fur production is bad for the environment. There are dangerous chemicals that are used, and it threatens our native species as well. So fur is unethical, bad for the environment, and the Commission should ban breeding for fur and selling of fur on the European market. Over 1 million citizens want this, so thank you very much to this European Citizens Initiative. We must follow up on this now. We have seen lots of initiatives on animal welfare, so we want to see the corresponding legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pitikainen.
Thank you for the makers of this initiative, for their activism, and for the signatories for the strength that they are presenting the views of the people and our citizens. Fur farming is unethical, for useless, impractical access item for the markets of Russia and China. This spreads diseases like avian influenza. It makes use of food that could be processed for human food. It processes animals so that they become ill and they don't have no well-being and causes lifelong suffering in small cages. And finally, their life ends unethically and very cruelly. It is time to go forward. I hope that, first of all, Commission will put a ban on fur farming and brings about ban on cage keeping and gets animal well-being legislation that is already in the working programme of the Commission. Tomorrow should be better than today, thanks to the activism of our citizens. Now it's our turn to act.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Pani Przewodnicząca.
Madam President, Madam Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, undoubtedly, fur farming is very cruel towards the animals. We are keeping them in impossible conditions and their lives are ended in an inhumane way. We cannot any longer ignore the cruelty of the fur farming sector. It is also a serious risk for public health. The pollution is immense. This is, again, a risk for our health and our ecosystems. We cannot also ignore a very difficult situation of people who live within proximity of fur farms. We have to stop this inhumane industry. We should say yes to the future where we have fur-free world. It's high time the EP and the Commission reacted.
Madam President, fur farming is deeply unethical. All animals need to live in an environment that is natural for them. Breeding animals in cages causes diseases and suffering. The European Citizens Initiatives for Free Europe is asking to ban fur farming in Europe. This needs to be banned because it is ethically and environmentally untenable. It is our time to act. Fur farming must be banned all over Europe. There are bans in place in many EU countries, and the EU needs to follow. This is not a profitable industry. Many farms are suffering financially, and the pandemic has shown that this is a problematic industry. Furs are popular only in Russia and China. It is important that we ban fur farming and that we also help the professionals of this industry into new jobs. However, the Commission has not acted. It is essential that we act upon these extremely popular European citizens' initiatives, and the Commission must show that they care about animal welfare in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kovasi. Thank you, Madam President. More than 1.5 million European citizens have mobilised to sign this petition calling for an end to the raising of animals for fur production in Europe. Locking these animals up in small cages and producing them just for fur is unacceptable. That's against the rules of animal welfare and concepts in our treaties. The time has come to put an end to this cruel practice. We have to highlight the risks which come with this production, both for human and animal health. Don't let's forget what happened during the pandemic, when hundreds of fur farms had to be closed down after viruses were being transmitted from animals to humans. 17 million animals were killed in Denmark alone. I can still remember the shock I felt seeing the pictures. This is also very important in terms of the EU policy on One Health. Human, animal, environmental health are all linked. The production of animals for fur has already been banned in 18 member states, and I think the time really has come for an initiative from the Commission. It's important that we do our best to protect our health and leave animals with their fur. Thank you, Ms. Kovasi. Moving on now to Catch the Eye. I have a series of names on the list. Mr. Ostrovicius, first of all.
Thank you, President, colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank all the citizens of Europe who've signed the petition and supported this very important initiative. No Fur-Free Europe. The initiative has a very meaningful name, and I am sure that the European Union institutions have to react quickly to the 1.5 million signatures of our citizens, and it has to come up with the reasonable conclusion and decision. Europe has grown to make such decisions, and this cruelty cannot be justified. I'm very happy to announce that Lithuania was the most recent country which in October adopted the decision to ban fur farming in Europe as of 2027. That's a very good example. And finally, colleagues, we shouldn't even call it a ban because it's a limitation, a restriction for the benefit of public interest. Thank you.
Ha fatto richiesta di intervento ora l'onorevole Bignon.
Ms. Bignon.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, all polls show how cruel fur production is, and it is rejected by virtually all Europeans. This is vital for animal rights and for the millions of Europeans who signed the petition for a fur-free Europe. We see daily atrocities in the industry. Animals locked in cages, injured, forced into cannibalism. It is a barbaric industry, raking in profits through the suffering of animals. Bear in mind that natural fur also has a far worse environmental impact than synthetic fur. This is a crucial issue. Commissioner, take it seriously and come forward with a ban on animal fur.
Ms. Vallis. Sorry, Mr. Wallace.
President, fur farming is deeply cruel.
It's also bad for biodiversity. Mink is an invasive species in Europe. We want to see a ban on fur farming in the EU, and we want to see a ban on farm fur products. But this should not be the limit of our ambition in terms of animal welfare reforms. In the Farm to Fork strategy, the Commission promised that it would propose a revision of the EU's animal welfare legislation by the end of this year. The Commission revealed its work programme this week. The proposal on the transport of animals is the only one of the 4 animal welfare regulations the Commission promised to revise that is actually included. The promised proposal to transition to cage-free systems is completely absent. These broken promises show a complete disregard not only for animal welfare and well-being, but also for participatory democracy. For fuck's sake, let's get rid of fur farming.
Grazie, onorevole Daly.
Thank you, Ms Daly.
Grazie, Presidente. Every year, millions of animals are bred and killed in the EU for fur. The main species obviously being mink, foxes and raccoon dogs. And the whole idea is so utterly repulsive and hard for so many citizens to understand. This is wanton cruelty. There is no basis for it whatsoever. And this initiative has massive support across all member states for a European ban on the farming and killing of animals for fur. Now, it is welcome that over a dozen member state governments, representing about 2/3 of the EU's population, have backed the calls for an EU-wide ban, including our own. Ireland, one of the more recent ones to join, despite many attempts that we made during our time in the Irish Parliament. In these infamous fur farms, foxes are kept in solitary confinement in battery cages, preventing them from natural interactions, prevented from running, digging, exploring in small cages less than 1.2 metre squares. We've seen the damage to them. Fur is non-essential. There are animal-free alternatives. For fuck's sake, it's time to ban the practice.
Grazie. E ora la rep.
Thank you. Turning back to the Commissioner now, asking you to respond to the debate.
Thank you very much, Chair, honourable members. I listened very carefully to all your interventions. As we heard today, animal farming for fur production is a crucial topic that attracts a high level of public, of citizen interest, and I thank you for putting these important questions related to it. Today's debate has provided a useful input to the Commission's assessment of the Citizens' Initiative's requests. Together with last week's public hearing, it will help us to formulate our conclusions in the communication on the Fur-Free Europe that we will adopt in December, and to reflect on the way forward on animal welfare. Once again, I thank you for your views and ideas expressed today.
Grazie. E con questo intervento la discussione.
Thank you. After this intervention, that intervention brings this debate to a close. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is European Protein Strategy. The first speaker is the rapporteur, Ms. Wisner.
La relatrice. Very fast.
Dear all,